Hello everyone. Welcome to Mr. Scary Stories channel, and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep. So before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching? Now get comfortable and relax. Story 1. In the city's underbelly, beneath the rot of its neon promises and endless hum of machinery, there lived a man who saw people as nothing more than moving silhouettes, empty, buzzing sacks of flesh. His name was Victor Crane, though in his own mind, he no longer answered to it. He was a whisper moving in the cracks between footsteps, a shadow no light wished to name. Victor drove a cab through the sickly glow of the city at night. Yellow lights smeared across rain-slicked streets. His passengers climbed in, some drunk, others weary, some chatty, others bitter. But to Victor, none of their words ever mattered. Their voices rang like flies buzzing against his ears, senseless, unbearable. He answered only in nods, never truly hearing, because inside his mind a louder sound thrummed, the heartbeat of his contempt. Every face was a blur, every voice a contamination. The city was his labyrinth, each street a pulsing vein of disease, every building a hive of noise. He floated through it, an invisible reaper clad in the mundane costume of a cab driver. But when the city's screams became unbearable, when the world pressed too tightly around his skull, Victor fed the silence. And when he fed, he killed. His victims were random, at least that was how it seemed to others. But to Victor, it was simple. He picked the ones whose noise clawed at him the most, the ones whose voices stuck in his brain like barbed wire. A woman who hummed tunelessly, oblivious to the irritation it caused. A man whose heavy breathing filled the cab like a diseased bellows. A girl who chewed gum with her mouth open, the smacking sound echoing in his skull. Noise, just noise. And when their bodies were still, when their mouths hung open in silent gasps, only then did Victor feel the quiet bloom within him, like stepping into a church after a storm. He called it his ritual of quiet. But the silence never lasted. Like water slipping through his fingers, it vanished, and the buzzing began anew, louder each time. And each time he returned to his cab, his city, and his shadows. There was an apartment, if it could be called that, where Victor resided. A single grimy room on the top floor of a forgotten building, where wallpaper peeled like old scabs and the air reeked of dampness and bleach. The window was always shut, thick curtains drawn. He couldn't bear the noise of the world outside even through glass. In this dim hovel, Victor kept his collection. A wooden box, inside tokens from the dead, a button from a coat, a torn piece of jewelry, a lock of hair tied neatly with thread. Each item carefully placed, handled like relics, objects of devotion. He didn't keep them for pleasure nor for power, but because in each token he captured a piece of the silence he had created. And then there were the journals, hundreds of pages filled with his tight, meticulous handwriting. Not confessions. Victor had no interest in guilt. Instead, they were observations, measurements of noise, lists of irritating behaviors, drawings of screaming mouths, distorted and grotesque, sometimes drawn with such pressure the pencil tore through the paper. Victor wrote to keep himself anchored, yet even then the noise pressed through. Sometimes in the depth of night he heard his mother's voice. "You'll never be rid of it, Victor," it whispered, "not unless you cut it all out." His mother, Margaret Crane, was long dead, but her voice, that survived, as shrill and cruel as when she'd been alive. She had despised noise too. She'd beaten him for humming as a child, for breathing too loudly, for crying when she struck him. "Silence is love," she'd hissed through clenched teeth. "Only the silent can be loved." Victor lived by that rule now. Yet love was not what he felt, only rage, only necessity. One night, the sky leaking cold rain, Victor drove with no purpose but to find a voice to silence. He prowled alleys, red light districts, noisy bars, places where the city's heartbeat was loudest. But then he saw her. She was standing behind the glass of a rundown studio, a narrow building wedged between two monoliths of glass and concrete. Light spilled from its high windows, illuminating her form, slender, precise, a shadow moving against a brighter canvas. Victor stopped. His hands gripped the wheel, knuckles whitening. She danced, but there was no music. Not a sound escaped the studio. No thumping bass, no violins, no drums. And yet she moved like she heard the very pulse of the earth. Every sway of her body, every pivot, every twirl was executed with an ethereal grace. It was as though she floated between this world and some other, unseen one. Victor stepped out of the cab, standing in the rain, his face exposed to the cold. The city's noise blurred. For a moment it was just her silent ballet, her body narrating what sound could not. He learned her name later, Evelyn Moore, a deaf woman known in her neighborhood as the dancer who heard with her bones. She did not pollute the air with noise. She was made of silence, pure. Victor watched her for hours, motionless beneath the shadows. His hands, usually itching for violence, remained still. No urge to kill, no desire to end her, just a curiosity, a pulling fascination. He returned the next night, and the next. Days blurred as he observed her. He stopped killing, stopped hearing his mother's voice. The noise dulled. But Evelyn did not know she was being watched. The studio's glass was her shield, the night her oblivious partner. Inside his mind, Victor began to build her not just as she was, but as he imagined her. A voice without sound, a presence without weight. A ghost, perhaps, but living. His journal pages began to fill with her figure, sketches of her dances, notes about her patterns. Still the noise waited. It crept back, whispering in his ear. On one such night, when Victor returned to his apartment, the walls seemed to pulse and breathe. Faces formed in the mildew, mouths moving without sound. And then his mother's voice returned. "She'll make noise eventually. They all do." Victor tried to scream back, but his throat caught. He smashed a glass against the wall, but the voices persisted. He had to know Evelyn's silence. He had to feel it. The next night he followed her home. She walked alone, her steps delicate yet assured. She lived in a modest flat, adorned with plants and books, simple, yet vibrant in a way Victor's world never was. He stood outside her door for hours listening. Nothing. No music, no phone calls, no television, just quiet. When he finally returned to his cab, he felt starved. His mind screamed for sound, for relief, but the only relief he knew was the blade. So he found a voice, a loud drunk staggering from a bar, singing an off-key tune. Victor killed him in an alley, swiftly, efficiently, his ritual of quiet. But this time the silence wasn't satisfying, because Evelyn's image lingered, and for the first time Victor wondered. Could silence be shared? A new question, terrifying in its alien nature. Yet the noise was already brewing again. The city howled. His mother whispered. And somewhere Evelyn danced, her silence a light Victor did not know how to reach. Victor Crane's days became irrelevant. Time bled together like streaks of oil on wet asphalt. The only distinction between 1 hour and the next was whether he was watching her or craving her. Evelyn Moore. The deaf dancer, the living embodiment of stillness. She had become the axis of his world, the only entity that moved without disturbing the air. She twirled, she spun, she stretched, yet her presence was without noise, like watching a dream take form and dissipate before it could awaken. Victor's cab sat abandoned most nights, parked 2 blocks away from the studio. His limbs ached from standing for hours, but his eyes never left the illuminated window where she danced alone. Through those panes of glass he learned her patterns, the ebb and flow of her rehearsals. She was a creature of habit. Her sessions lasted 3 hours, every other evening, sometimes longer when the moon was heavy and pale. On nights she did not come, Victor's mind filled with rot. The city's noises clawed again, louder, shriller. He found himself packing his apartment, muttering to the walls, trying to smother the screams of remembered victims, for their voices never really died. They whispered in cracks, in peeling paint, in the rumble of distant traffic. Margaret's voice, always sharpest, returned to mock him. She'll betray the silence. They always do. End her before she opens her mouth. Victor did not want to listen. Evelyn was different. Evelyn's own life, unknowingly entwined with her stalker's madness, was defined by deliberate simplicity. Born into a soundless world, she had grown up learning to read faces, fingers, vibrations. Dance was her rebellion against silence, or so others said. But to Evelyn, it was less rebellion and more communion. She danced to feel whole, to speak through muscle and bone, to tell the world, I am here. Her apartment was small but warm, walls lined with succulents, framed art, and handwritten notes pinned like memories. She kept journals not unlike Victor, but hers recorded movements, thoughts, and sometimes sketches of dances she wished to choreograph. There was no music player, no television. Her world was entirely visual. When she sat by her window to read or write, she wore an expression of serene detachment, as though listening to things no one else could hear. Victor observed from across the street, blending into the scaffolding of a decaying building. Rain soaked him some nights, but he did not care. He wrote her name in his journal over and over, drawing the curve of her limbs in motion, mapping the geography of her body through pencil and obsession. The urge to kill began to resurface, gnawing at his insides. But each time Victor prepared to stalk a victim, her image interrupted him. He could not reconcile the need for blood with the need to watch Evelyn. Instead, his violence became internal. He bit his fingers until they bled. He banged his head against the walls of his apartment, the plaster cracking beneath his skull. He scribbled curses into his journals, curses against the noise, against his mother, against himself. The shadows on his walls began to move when he wasn't looking. Somewhere else in the city, Detective Samuel Briggs traced the trail of the mutilated. 8 victims to date, each one slaughtered without apparent pattern, each with mouths disfigured, throats slashed so deeply that the larynx collapsed. The press had dubbed the killer the Whisper Butcher, a name Briggs found insulting, for nothing about the crimes was subtle. Briggs was not a detective of glamour. He was methodical, worn thin by years of bodies and lies. Yet something about this case disturbed him more than usual. Witnesses spoke of seeing a quiet, pale man never heard speaking, always vanishing before they could react. Briggs collected scraps of CCTV footage, blurry captures of a figure moving like a ghost through alleys and dark corners. He noted the appearance of the same cab near multiple scenes. Slowly, he closed in on the pattern, though the killer still floated just beyond his grasp. But the city would not remain patient. The Whisper Butcher would strike again. Briggs could feel it. Victor remained ensnared by Evelyn's presence. He could no longer just watch. He needed more. One evening, after following her from the studio, he waited until she entered her apartment, then crept forward under cover of night. He left a gift on her doorstep. A delicate chain bracelet, tarnished with age, once belonging to a previous victim, now repurposed as an offering. A trinket of silence. Victor watched from the shadows as Evelyn discovered the bracelet the next morning. She held it, puzzled but charmed by its delicate craftsmanship. She pinned a note by her door. "Thank you, but I don't know who you are." Victor's pulse surged. She noticed. She spoke in writing, but still a reply. The voice in his mind whispered, "See, she invites noise. She is not pure." Victor shook his head violently. She hadn't spoken. She wrote. It was different. But the voice, his mother, persisted. "Mark her before she becomes like the others. Silence her before it's too late." Victor's nails tore into his palms. He refused, not her, not yet. Instead, he began to leave more tokens: a pressed flower, a sketch of her dancing, a polished stone. Evelyn remained puzzled but unafraid. She told herself it was a kind stranger, a secret admirer. She had no idea of the eyes that never blinked, watching from across the street. Victor's internal fractures deepened. Nights blurred into days with no sleep, no rest. He hallucinated full conversations with Evelyn, imagined her inviting him inside, speaking to him in a voice soft and calm, one she did not possess. He built a version of her in his mind, an Evelyn that whispered back, that praised his silence, that danced only for him. The real Evelyn was oblivious. One rainy night, Victor's restraint cracked. He broke into the studio when it was closed, his tools for killing left behind, replaced only by a need to mark the space. He painted the walls with charcoal and red ink grotesque faces, screaming mouths distorted and stretching. In the center, he drew Evelyn's silhouette, surrounded by faceless specters, all howling without sound. Then he left, disappearing into the rain before sunrise. When Evelyn arrived for practice, she stopped cold. The walls screamed visually contorted images, accusations she could not hear but could see. She knew then someone watched her, someone had been near. Fear bloomed, slow and sour. She filed a police report but doubted anyone would care. She was just a dancer. The world did not fear for dancers. Yet that night Evelyn locked her doors tighter. She moved with caution. The city felt colder, as though eyes stared from every dark space. Victor watched her increased caution, his mind torn between satisfaction and sorrow. He wanted her to notice, but not to fear. He wrote unsent letters to her, filled with apologies, explanations, declarations of adoration. But the letters never left his apartment. They were tucked between journals, rotting with the rest of his mind. Detective Briggs caught wind of the studio incident. The grotesque drawings bore a similarity to sketches found at one of the murder scenes, drawings of screaming mouths. A fingerprint, partial and degraded, gave him his first real lead. It led to a cab company, a man named Victor Crane. Briggs began to dig, a man with no friends, no family, living in the city's forgotten places. A face captured just enough on camera to warrant suspicion. Briggs felt the stirrings of the hunt turning in his favor. Victor felt the noose tightening, though he did not know yet of Briggs. Instead, his mind focused solely on Evelyn. The voice of his mother grew shriller, her presence now a permanent fixture in the corners of his room. She stood there, or rather, the image of her, skin rotting, eyes worm-filled, mouth dripping dark ichor. She'll betray you, end her. Victor wept, a soundless, pathetic sobbing. He didn't want to end Evelyn, she was his silence. But his hands wanted to kill. And Evelyn danced on, her feet light but her eyes heavy with new dread, feeling the cold weight of unseen eyes. Somewhere between obsession and violence, the line was vanishing. Victor watched her, and the world roared. The next time he stood across the street, Evelyn's gaze seemed to meet his through the window, not directly, not surely, but for the briefest moment, Victor thought she knew. And the voice inside him whispered with glee, "Now she'll make noise, now she'll scream." Victor Crane no longer knew the taste of sleep. What little rest his body stole came in fragments, brittle and haunted. His eyes, bloodshot and sunken, drank in the city's neon bones like a starving man. But the noise was deafening now. It was not the city's fault, not anymore. The noise lived inside him, a relentless swarm of voices, whispers, laughter. Most of all, his mother's voice, a guttural, wet sound, like teeth chewing through spoiled meat. "You watch her, but you do nothing," she sneered. "She'll ruin you, Victor, silence her." Victor scratched at his temples until skin flaked under his nails. Evelyn Moore still danced, but her steps were heavier, her glances nervous. She felt the eyes even when she could not hear the footsteps. She fortified her studio, new locks, reinforced doors, but Victor always found his way to watch. But watching was no longer enough. He wanted to own her silence, to keep it before it slipped away like all the others. The thought burrowed deep, not to kill her, not yet, but to possess whatever made her so empty of noise. And so Victor planned. The studio stood as it always did, a forgotten relic amidst towering glass and steel, its windows weeping condensation under the cold night. Victor crept through back alleys, hands gloved, a satchel slung over his shoulder. Inside the satchel, tools. A coiled length of rope, a knife honed to a surgical edge, cloth and tape, instruments not just for killing but for control. He picked the lock like a pianist would strike keys, each click a note in his morbid symphony. The door yielded. Inside, the studio was dark, save for the faintest silver sheen of moonlight filtering through skylights. Dust floated in the air like dead skin. The mirrors on the walls stood like silent witnesses, reflecting infinite shadows. Victor moved through the space, his footsteps soundless. His gaze roamed the bar, the speakerless walls, the scuffed floors that knew only the language of feet and breath. At the center, a bloodstain awaited him. Not literal blood, not yet, but a mental mark, a memory of where Evelyn danced. Here, her bare feet kissed the floor, her silence bloomed. Victor knelt, laying out his tools, but then he hesitated. He saw himself in the mirror, gaunt, eyes blackened, cheeks hollow. But behind his reflection stood his mother. Not Margaret as she once was, but as she appeared in his nightmares. Skin pale and stretched, hair lank and soaked, her face split open vertically from lip to brow, exposing a black tunnel of teeth. "Why wait?" she hissed. "Make the noise stop now." Victor shook his head violently. He wasn't here to kill Evelyn, he was here to... What? Speak. See her up close. He didn't know anymore. Suddenly, the studio's entrance clicked. She was here. Evelyn, unaware of his presence, entered quietly. She carried no music, no phone, just a notebook and a bottle of water. She stretched, her body fluid as ever, but her eyes remained wary. Victor remained pressed against a column, barely breathing. She danced, though less freely. There was tension in her shoulders, a stiffness in her motions. Fear haunted her steps. Victor watched, entranced, his mind a vortex of desire and dread. And then he stepped forward. Evelyn saw the movement in the mirror first, a flicker of shadow not her own. She turned, eyes wide, mouth parting, but no scream came, because even if she had one, she'd never hear it. Victor emerged slowly, hands raised in an awkward attempt at peace. He looked monstrous in the dim light, drenched, hollow, trembling. Evelyn backed away, her hands up defensively, trying to signal in sign language, but Victor did not understand. He stared, fascinated by her panic. Even in fear, she made no sound. She was everything he imagined, terror personified in silence. But his body betrayed him. Victor lunged. Evelyn ran, darting between columns, her dancer's agility keeping her barely ahead. She grabbed the bar, swinging herself away, dodging his grasp. Victor snarled, an animal sound. He chased, but his mind fractured. In the mirrors he saw not Evelyn, but reflections of his mother, laughing, pointing. Clumsy little boy, can't even catch her. He screamed, fists pounding the mirror until cracks bloomed like spiderwebs. Shards fell, slicing his hands, blood streaking the floor. Evelyn fled through the side door, into the alley, into the night. Victor collapsed, breath heaving, surrounded by broken glass. His own face stared back in fragments, a puzzle of madness. Detective Briggs arrived minutes later, called by a panicked Evelyn who had flagged down a stranger to help. The studio was a mess of blood, glass, and charcoal images. Briggs noted the patterns, the same grotesque screaming faces, the same disturbed artistry found before. Briggs helped Evelyn communicate through a writing pad. She described her stalker, pale, hollow, eyes like pits, a man who didn't speak but watched. Briggs knew then, the cab driver, Victor Crane. The hunt was no longer cold. Victor stumbled back to his apartment, bleeding, delirious. The city around him warped, buildings swayed like trees, streets coiled like serpents. He barely made it inside before collapsing amidst his journals. Shadows pressed from the walls, some his mother, others his victims, all whispering. "You failed, you let her run. She'll sing to the police now. She'll make noise for them." Victor rocked back and forth, clutching his head. He imagined Evelyn's face, contorted in fear, yet soundless. He could not let that be her last image in his mind. Evelyn refused to stop dancing. Days passed, but she returned to the studio, determined not to surrender her space. She danced with knives in her bag, keys between her fingers, always ready to defend herself. But the fear lingered. Every shadow stretched too long, every reflection in the mirror seemed wrong. Victor watched her from afar now, hidden, broken, bleeding, but still watching. She did not know it yet, but she had become his world. And his world was rotting. The voice inside him whispered a final, inevitable truth. "Soon she'll scream, and when she does, you'll know what to do." The city no longer resembled anything Victor Crane once recognized. Its lights blurred like melting stars, its streets twisted and branched like veins beneath diseased skin. The sounds, oh the sounds, they had grown unbearable. Every voice, every car horn, every footstep a shriek, a scream, a drilling echo. Victor no longer heard them through his ears. They vibrated directly inside his skull, a constant drilling, a chorus of howling ghosts. He no longer kept time. Days passed, or maybe weeks, he didn't know. The only markers of his descent were the faces on the walls. His apartment had become a mausoleum of madness. The walls, once just cracked and water-stained, now breathed. They pulsed, as though veins ran beneath the paint. Faces formed in the plaster, the dead, his victims, his mother, and even Evelyn. They whispered to him, "You're nothing without us. You'll never have her. She's slipping away. She'll drown you in sound." His mother's visage dominated them all. She stood in the corner always, her head cocked at an impossible angle, jaw dislocated, mouth gaping wider than any human mouth should. "You're weak, Victor. She'll betray you. Make her silent forever." Victor tore at his skin, his nails carving welts down his arms. He scribbled frantic entries into his journals, pages of nonsense, symbols, repetitions of "silence is love. Silence is love. Silence is love." And then among the noise, a new voice emerged, soft, clear, gentle. It was Evelyn. She appeared in the corner of his room, not in flesh, but in hallucination. She stepped forward, graceful, her eyes kind. She knelt before him. "Victor," she whispered, though she had no voice in life, "you can end the noise, you just need me." He sobbed. She touched his face, or so he felt. She smiled, radiating warmth, understanding. "Let me help you," she cooed. This Evelyn, the one his mind created, was perfect. A silent angel. She promised peace. But his mother, towering and shadowy, screamed over her. "Lies, she'll scream like the rest. Take her." Victor clutched his head, shaking between the two voices. His mind shredded further. He howled, a sound no human throat should produce, raw and wet, like the cry of something born wrong. He had to choose, but the voices twisted into one conclusion. She needed to be his, entirely, forever. Elsewhere, the city marched on, oblivious to the storm brewing in one man's decaying mind. But Detective Samuel Briggs was getting closer. Through scattered clues, fingerprints, sightings, cab records, he narrowed the search. Surveillance footage showed a shadowy figure watching Evelyn from a rooftop 2 nights ago. It was Victor. Briggs began sleeping less, driven by a grim knowing. The killer wasn't just obsessed, he was accelerating. There was a fever to Victor's madness, a countdown only the detective could feel. Briggs carried Evelyn's photo everywhere now, a constant reminder of the prey the predator stalked. And Evelyn, she lived within her own shrinking world. Evelyn Moore no longer danced freely. Each step was a question, each movement shadowed by fear. She still went to the studio, defiance or denial, she didn't know. But the mirrors no longer comforted her. She stared into them too long, always half expecting to see him, that pale, hollow-eyed figure staring back. She dreamt of him now. Dreams of dancing in an empty theater with him sitting in the front row, applauding silently, his hands raw and bleeding. Worse still, sometimes in her dreams, she danced for him willingly. Evelyn began carrying a knife everywhere. She learned to sleep lightly, though true rest eluded her. She wrote in her journals more than ever, confessing her terror, her suspicion that the city itself was watching her. She saw strangers on buses and streets who lingered too long in their gaze. She caught herself staring back, daring them to approach. But she was alone. Her family lived far away. Her friends had grown distant. Her silence, once her refuge, now became a coffin. She asked herself every night, what if I never hear him coming? Victor watched her from the shadows always. He kept a distance for now, but the hallucinated Evelyn urged him closer. She's ready, the phantom promised. She's waiting for you. His mind built stories that Evelyn danced for him, that her glances at the mirrors were invitations. He convinced himself that she understood, that her silence was not fear but beckoning. At night his mother roared, her voice merging with the wall's whispers. Bind her, claim her, kill the sound. He couldn't hold back much longer. Detective Briggs assembled a sting, plainclothes officers near the studio, patrols in the neighborhood. He met with Evelyn, communicating via written notes and an interpreter. He's watching, Briggs wrote. I need you to keep going to the studio, but we'll be there. He won't touch you. Evelyn hesitated but agreed. She would not surrender her life to fear. Yet in her heart, she doubted anyone could truly see the man who watched in silence. That night, the studio stood as a lone beacon amid the sleeping city. Evelyn arrived with a shaking heart, but she danced anyway. Victor was already watching. From a rooftop across the street, his hollow eyes drank her in. But the hallucinated Evelyn stood beside him, whispering, Go to her, she's calling you. His mother screamed, Now! Victor leapt from the rooftop, scaling down like a pale spider, limbs nimble despite the grime of malnutrition. The real Evelyn danced, feeling the air tight, the walls closing. In the shadows, Victor approached, eyes black pits, mouth ajar, teeth grinding. The hallucinated Evelyn smiled behind him, guiding his steps. Outside, Briggs caught a flicker of motion on a nearby rooftop, a shadow leaping down. His gut clenched. He's here, Briggs shouted, gun drawn. Officers moved, but Victor was already inside the building, slipping past locks, driven by the chorus of voices in his head. The studio door creaked open. Evelyn stopped dancing. She turned and saw him. Victor stood there, bleeding, eyes wild, a stitched grin of madness on his face. She backed away, her knife trembling in her hand. Victor raised his hands, palms open, tears mixing with blood. You don't have to scream, he whispered. She couldn't hear him, but she saw his lips move, saw the plea in his expression. Then the footsteps, loud stomping, officers, Briggs. Victor's face twisted in agony. He rushed forward not to kill, but to grab, to take Evelyn away, to claim her before the noise did. Evelyn slashed blindly, the knife slicing his arm. Victor howled, retreating. Briggs burst in, gun raised. Victor fled through a side door, a shadow among shadows, vanishing before bullets could find him. Victor escaped, bleeding, sobbing, laughter and cries mixing. His mind was broken beyond repair. The city bled noise. His mother screamed louder than ever. And yet, Evelyn remained out of reach. But not for long. She was his silence. She would be his, or she would never dance again. The city waited beneath a sky heavy with storm clouds, the air suffocating, pregnant with rain that refused to fall. There was no breeze, no relief, just a taut electric tension as if the very streets held their breath. Tonight was Evelyn Moore's grand performance, the culmination of years of silent dedication. A theater, aged and decayed but still proud, would host her. She would dance for an audience that could hear, and she, who could not, would move to the vibrations alone. But unbeknownst to the gathering crowd, another figure prepared for the same night, one who moved not for beauty, but for silence. Victor Crane had returned from his spiral of madness, sharpened, focused. The hallucinations no longer spoke in many voices. Now they sang in unison, a single command. Take her, make her yours before the noise devours her. He stood in his apartment, a cathedral of decay, where journals lay soaked in blood, pages stuck together like wet tissue. The walls pulsed with imaginary heartbeats, and the image of his mother loomed over him, bloated, decaying, yet grinning. Victor dressed carefully, not as the specter he had been, but as a stagehand, blending into the workers who buzzed backstage. His tools hidden beneath his uniform, the rope, the knife, the tape. Tonight there would be no more hesitation. The theater buzzed with low voices, the crowd a sea of murmurs. The stage, bathed in soft blue light, waited like a mouth ready to swallow the performer whole. Detective Samuel Briggs was there, hidden among the faces, eyes scanning every shadow. His hand hovered near his concealed weapon. He didn't trust the officers backstage. Victor was a shadow, a sickness that seeped through cracks no one noticed. Briggs knew tonight would end in blood. He just didn't know whose. Evelyn stood in her dressing room, staring into the mirror. Her face was painted subtly, her eyes rimmed with kohl, her lips pale as bone. She looked like a ghost preparing to haunt. She tried to steady her hands, but they trembled. In the quiet, she felt the vibrations of the audience beyond the walls, the gentle thrum of footsteps, the heartbeat of anticipation. But beneath it, she felt something else. A presence, a weight pressing on the air. She could not hear him, but she knew. He was here. Victor moved backstage, a phantom in borrowed clothes. No one noticed the gauntness of his face, the fever in his eyes. He was just another crew member in the bustle of production. But his gaze never left one door, Evelyn's dressing room. He pressed his hand against it, feeling the cold wood, imagining her on the other side. His mind showed him a vision, Evelyn turning to him, smiling, her hand signing an invitation. But his mother's voice broke through. She'll scream soon. She'll call for them. Take her now. He reached for the door handle, but it twisted before he could. The door opened, and there she stood. Evelyn froze. Her eyes widened in recognition. Victor smiled, a hideous broken smile. Evelyn slammed the door in his face, but Victor pushed, snarling, throwing his weight forward. She stumbled back, reaching for the knife in her bag. Victor lunged, grabbing her wrist, his other hand clasping her mouth out of instinct, not realizing she could not scream. But she fought. She slashed blindly, the blade grazing his side. He roared an animal sound, pain and pleasure mixed. Then came the footsteps, shouts, Briggs's voice. Victor released her, backing away just as the door burst open. Briggs appeared, gun raised. Victor's mind fractured, the lights too bright, the noise unbearable. He fled, stumbling through corridors, weaving past startled stagehands. Briggs chased, calling for backup. Victor burst onto the empty stage, bathed in blue light. For a moment the crowd gasped, murmurs rising. They thought it was part of the performance. Victor stood, breathing raggedly, staring out at the faceless audience. In his eyes they were all bleeding, mouths wide open, their screams silent but visible. Then Evelyn appeared behind him, stepping onto the stage defiant, knife in hand. Victor turned, their eyes locking under the spotlight. Briggs emerged, gun aimed, shouting, "Don't move, Victor, it's over." But Victor only saw Evelyn. She stood tall, fearless. She signed something he couldn't understand, but he saw her eyes, steady and cold. She wasn't afraid anymore. And that broke him. Victor screamed, a shriek so raw it cracked in his throat, and charged at her. Briggs fired. The bullet tore into Victor's shoulder, spinning him sideways, but he kept coming, driven by madness alone. Evelyn stood her ground. Victor raised the knife, and then Briggs fired again. This time Victor collapsed. The theater erupted in screams, real screams. The audience realized the horror they had witnessed. Victor lay on the stage, bleeding, gasping, eyes darting. Above him his mother stood, or so he saw, grinning, her mouth a black pit. Evelyn stood over him, the knife still in her hand, her chest rising and falling. Victor reached for her, his lips moving, whispering, "You were my silence." Then he went still. The stage fell into chaos. Medics, officers, cries. But Evelyn stood motionless, staring down at the man who had haunted her every step. She had not screamed. She had never made a sound. And he was gone. Briggs stood beside her, hand on her shoulder. She looked at him, eyes distant. There were no words, just the heavy, pregnant silence of the stage, the blood pooling under the lights. Victor Crane was dead. Or so they thought. Victor Crane was declared dead on the stage of the old theater, his blood soaking into the wood grain, his body pale and hollow like a shed skin. But death is a stubborn concept, especially for minds already broken. The medics zipped his body in a black bag. The police carried away evidence in sterile boxes, the knife, the rope, his bloodied uniform. Detective Samuel Briggs watched it all with the heaviness of inevitability. A predator caught too late, yet caught nonetheless. Still, a part of Briggs remained restless. He didn't trust the finality of it. Victor had felt like something more than a man in the end, more like a disease given form, a fever dream wrapped in flesh. But the law required certainty, so Briggs wrote his reports, filed the case, and watched the city breathe a little easier. Evelyn Moore refused to dance again. She gave no interviews, rejected all invitations to speak publicly. To the world, she became the dancer who survived the Whisper Butcher, but she did not want that story. She returned to her modest apartment, where every shadow still seemed to shift. She lived with her curtains closed, her doors bolted, her nights heavy with insomnia. But she never left the city. She tried to live quietly, surrounded by her plants, her books, her journals. Yet the studio's walls never left her mind. The mirrors that once reflected grace now reflected suspicion. Because sometimes, when she looked too long into her own reflection, she saw him. Not always clearly, a flicker, a shadow, a shape that resembled a man standing just behind her. Her therapist called it trauma, a phantom of fear, but Evelyn knew better. Some silences are too loud. Far from Evelyn's world in the morgue's basement, a power outage had delayed processing that night. For hours, the bodies lay in cold dark, no refrigeration, no surveillance. When the lights returned, the night shift worker noticed that Victor Crane's body bag was soaked in blood from the inside out. as though the corpse had bled anew. But when they unzipped the bag, Victor's body remained still. His eyes closed, his mouth frozen in that rictus grin. Still dead. Still dead. They said the mind plays tricks, that electricity returning can make cold muscles twitch. But the morgue assistant swore, just before they zipped the bag again, that Victor's lips had moved. They had formed a single word. Silence. Detective Briggs never slept well after that case. He dreamed of mirrors, of tunnels where faces whispered, of blood dripping upwards. On his desk sat Victor's final journal, its last page smeared with a sentence written over and over. She is my silent, she is my silent, she is my silence. Briggs sometimes thought he heard that phrase whispered when he was alone, in the static between radio calls, in the hum of streetlights. He told himself it was nothing. Yet whenever he passed by a dance studio window, a flash of movement inside made him flinch, just for a moment, just in case. Because dead things stay dead. Until they don't. And in her apartment, late at night, Evelyn sometimes danced alone again, hopping to chase the weight away. But in the mirrors, even when the room was locked, she always felt, watched. And when the air grew too still and her feet stopped moving and her heart slowed, she could almost feel cold fingers brushing her shoulder. And then she was never quite sure if she was still alone. Story 2. The countryside greeted them with silence. It was not the kind of quiet that suggested peace, but a heavy, suffocating hush, as though the land itself had paused its breathing to listen. The car that carried Hannah Mercer and Ethan Blake rumbled up the dirt path that split the fields like a wound in the earth. Dust clouded behind them, rising in lazy coils. Ahead on a slight hill, the house waited. It was not welcoming. 2 stories of grayed timber, its roof sagging in the middle, its windows dark like blinded eyes. Vines climbed its sides, some dead, others alive and still curling. The porch bowed in the middle, as though the house was ready to collapse into itself. Yet they had chosen this place. For a fresh start, they told themselves. After the miscarriage, after the silent days in the city apartment where every corner reminded them of what they had lost, Ethan suggested they leave. A new home, in a new place. The countryside would offer space to breathe, to heal. The house had been cheap, too cheap, a remnant of an estate sale, tied up in old history no one cared to remember. We'll fix it up, Ethan had said when they first saw the pictures. It has bones. Now standing before it, Hannah wasn't sure those bones were still sound. They stepped out of the car. The air was still, warm but dry, carrying a faint smell of damp earth and wood rot. Hannah stared up at the house. She shivered despite the sunlight. Ethan smiled, trying to pierce the weight that already pressed on them. It's got character. Hannah only nodded. The front door groaned as Ethan pushed it open, the sound stretching too long, as though the house protested their entry. Inside, the air was stale, a cocktail of dust, mold, and something faintly metallic, like rusted iron or old blood. Wooden floors creaked with every step. The wallpaper had peeled in strips, revealing older, darker layers beneath. A grand staircase wound upwards, its banister veiled in cobwebs. Room by room, they explored. A living room with an ancient fireplace, a parlor with chairs draped in white sheets like forgotten corpses, a kitchen where dust coated every surface. The second floor held bedrooms, one master, 2 smaller ones, and a room at the end of the hall that Ethan hesitated before opening. Inside, a nursery. A single cradle sat in the center, swaying gently though no wind stirred. Toys long forgotten littered the floor, a stuffed bear missing an eye, wooden blocks scattered in a careless sprawl. Hannah's chest tightened. She closed the door quietly, locking it with a soft click. They unpacked slowly. The house absorbed their voices, their footsteps. Every sound felt muffled, distant. By evening, exhaustion pulled at them. They lay in the master bedroom, the bed newly assembled, fresh sheets stark against the faded walls. "Feels weird," Ethan admitted, staring at the ceiling. "It feels heavy," Hannah whispered. They fell asleep holding hands, comfort in shared touch. The night breathed differently. Hannah stirred, her eyes fluttering open to a room bathed in shadow. The moonlight was thin, barely enough to shape the walls. Then she heard it. Footsteps. Above them. Slow, deliberate, heel then toe, heel then toe. But there was no floor above them. Her breath caught. She strained to listen, but the sound faded. She told herself it was the house settling, the wood shrinking in the night air. But the next night the footsteps returned, closer. And on the third night she dreamed, or thought she dreamed, of waking paralyzed. Something sat on her chest, heavy, cold. She couldn't move, couldn't speak. A shadow hunched over her, face obscured by long, matted hair. Its fingers, long and bone-thin, traced her collarbone, light as breath. A voice seeped into her skull, not from lips but from somewhere deeper. "The more you see me, the more I stay." When she woke, her chest ached. She found bruises, faint and round, like fingertips. She told herself it was a nightmare. But the nursery door stood open. Neither of them remembered opening it. Days passed. The house grew no warmer despite the sun. Shadows lingered too long in corners. Reflections in the few uncovered mirrors seemed delayed, hesitant to mimic. Hannah painted over one mirror in the hallway. She couldn't stand the way it watched. They found an old leather-bound book in the attic, brittle and dust-choked. It contained scribbled notes, a diary of sorts. It spoke of the night hag, a spirit, a shadow that sits upon the chest of sleepers, feeding on breath, on fear. An old legend, part of Nordic folklore. One entry read, "If you see her, she stays. She watches from the corner of your eye, never look too long." Hannah closed the book, her hands trembling. That night she fought sleep, but exhaustion is patient. She dreamed again. Frozen in bed, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. Then the shadow descended, face hovering inches above hers, its breath cold, its presence undeniable. "You woke me, little sleeper. Now I wake you." She woke gasping, tears on her cheeks. The nursery door was open again, and the cradle rocked slowly. In the morning, Ethan suggested they visit the village nearby, talk to locals, learn the house's history. Hannah agreed, though her eyes remained heavy, her mind clouded. As they drove away, dust trailing behind them, the house stood on the hill, silent and still. Watching, waiting, because the new owners had arrived. And the house was never empty for long. Night in the countryside was absolute. Not just an absence of light, but a swallowing, a presence that crowded the windows, thick and unyielding, pressing into the rooms like a heavy, unseen fog. In that darkness, the house watched Hannah Mercer. She lay awake the first night, staring into the dark above, listening to the shifting creaks of wood, the hum of an old house settling into itself. But the sounds did not comfort her. They felt alive, rhythmic, as if the house breathed through its walls. Sleep eventually pulled her under, but sleep did not bring peace. She woke, or thought she woke, frozen in her bed, unable to move or cry out. A weight pressed against her chest, not pain but pressure, as though something straddled her, knees sinking into the mattress on either side of her ribs. She saw it then, a shadow, shaped like a woman, hunched and waiting, her face hidden by tangled hair that moved as if in water. No eyes, no mouth, but it watched. Hannah's lungs burned for air. She tried to scream, to thrash, but her body betrayed her, stiff and heavy as stone. The shadow leaned close. The smell of damp earth and rot filled her nostrils, and then a whisper not aloud but inside her head. "The more you see me, the more I stay." She awoke fully with a gasp, clutching her chest. Ethan Blake stirred beside her, but the house was still again, innocent in its wooden groans. She told herself it was just sleep paralysis, a trick of exhaustion and the mind. But the next night it returned. This time, the shadow's hands, long and thin with clawed fingers, rested on her throat. They did not squeeze, but they pressed just enough for her to feel the pulse of her fear against her skin. When morning broke, a faint bruise bloomed on her neck, blue and purple like a wilted flower. By the third night, Hannah feared sleep itself. She fought against it with coffee, packing, cold showers, anything to keep her eyes open. Yet sleep always comes. And so did the night hag. Ethan began to notice her decline, the exhaustion under her eyes, the shaking of her hands, the unspoken terror that clung to her skin. "You need help, Han," he urged. Maybe you should talk to someone." But who could she tell? Who would understand a shadow that pressed on her chest at night? In the attic, searching for anything to distract herself, Hannah discovered an old, dust-choked book, handwritten, its leather cover cracked with age. The pages told of a presence, the night hag, an ancient demon of sleep and shadow who rides the chests of the vulnerable. The book warned, attention is invitation. The more the mind feeds her shape, the more real she becomes. Hannah began to see flashes of the hag while awake, in mirrors, in reflections on darkened windows. A flicker of hair here, a hand withdrawing from a doorframe there. Desperate, she reached out beyond doctors to the local university, where she found Professor Walter Gray, an aging folklorist whose voice trembled as she described her nights. "You've made her aware," he said gravely. "If she's anchored, she can cross the threshold from dreams to waking life." "How do I stop her?" Hannah asked. Gray hesitated. "You stop fearing her or she'll stay." But fear is not so easily undone. That night Hannah surrendered to sleep unintentionally, collapsing on the couch. The hag was waiting. She felt the weight again, heavier, colder. The shadow leaned close, her hair dripping onto Hannah's face, strands like dead worms. And then a whisper darker than before. "I was always here, little sleeper. I just needed you to look." When morning came, Hannah awoke with bruises on her collarbones like finger marks. She stared into the hallway mirror, and for just a moment, her reflection did not move when she did. The house was no longer just a place. It was a vessel, and the night hag had begun to descend. The house no longer waited for nightfall. It whispered in the daylight. Hannah Mercer's mind had begun to slip, and she knew it. She slept less, yet dreamed more. Waking and dreaming blended like ink in water, a murky blur of shadows that moved when she wasn't looking. She kept mirrors covered now, every reflective surface veiled with cloth, paper, even paint, because in reflections the night hag watched. Not in form, not fully, but in suggestions, a curl of black hair where there should be none, an eye where only shadow should linger. And sometimes the reflection smiled, but Hannah was not smiling. She set up a camera in the bedroom, pointing at the bed, determined to catch proof. When she reviewed the footage, it showed her body twitching, gasping, choking, her chest heaving like something unseen pressed her down. But on the third night of recording, something else appeared. For just a moment, a shadow, tall and thin, passed across the frame. A silhouette with long limbs, its head crowned with a veil of hair. It stood by the bed, watching. Then gone. Ethan Blake watched the footage and paled. The air between them changed, heavier, electric. She's here," he whispered. Hannah said nothing. She didn't have to. Because by then, Ethan had begun to dream of her too. In his sleep he saw the same shadow. sometimes in the corner of the room, sometimes perched on Hannah's chest, grinning with teeth made of bone. Once he woke gasping, and Hannah watched in horror as his eyes remained open, unfocused, his mouth moving silently, as if whispering to someone unseen. Desperation drove them to call Professor Walter Gray again. The old man came to the house, his face grim, his eyes uneasy. He examined the house with a scholar's eye, tracing the wood beams, the carvings beneath the paint. He found them protective runes, old, nearly worn away, once meant to ward off spirits. This house wasn't just a home, Gray muttered. It was a cage. For what? Ethan asked. Gray looked to Hannah. For her. The night hag. Gray explained that such entities are born of grief, guilt, and attention. The more the victim fears, the stronger it grows. When grief weakens the mind's defenses, the hag feeds, crossing the divide between dreams and waking life. Hannah felt her stomach twist. She said, I woke her. Gray nodded. Then she won't sleep again. Nights became a waking nightmare. Hannah experienced false awakenings, waking in bed, only to realize she was still dreaming, the hag sitting by the window, brushing her long hair with a comb of bone. Other times Hannah truly woke, but her body still felt frozen, her vision dark at the edges, her breath shallow, as if part of her was still trapped in the dream. The house was changing. Wood warped and groaned, floorboards bowed as though straining against weight unseen. Doors swelled in their frames, refusing to open without force. At dusk, shadows stretched longer than they should. Windows reflected rooms that no longer looked like hers. In the attic, Hannah found a diary, pages scrawled by a previous occupant. The entries described the same affliction: sleep paralysis, shadow visits, bruises. The last entry was a smear of ink and a single line. She is awake. No further pages followed. One evening, as the sky bled red, Hannah stood in the living room, staring at the darkened hallway. For a brief, heart-crushing second, she saw herself standing there, pale, hair draped forward, eyes like two pits of soil. Her double watched, head tilted, then stepped backward into the dark. When Hannah blinked, the hallway was empty. But the impression remained, as if the other version of her was waiting just beyond sight, watching through thin veils of reality. Ethan stopped sleeping. He couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, the hag was there, grinning in the shadows, her hand stroking his throat, whispering, "Let me ride you too." His eyes grew hollow, his skin pallid. The house fed on both of them now. Professor Gray prepared a plan, a desperate one. He spoke of lucid dreaming, of entering the nightmare consciously to confront the hag directly. A ritual of runes and sleep, a tether between mind and body, but it was dangerous. If you lose yourself in the dream, Gray warned Hannah, you'll never wake again. The new moon was approaching, and the night hag was growing bold. Sometimes when the house fell still, a sound echoed faintly, footsteps, not heavy but dragging, as though someone moved with broken limbs across the floors above. And always the whisper, "Almost time, little sleeper, almost time to stay." The house was hungrier now. It groaned in the late hours, wood stretching, sighing, as though its bones prepared for an arrival. Even the air grew denser, holding a dampness that smelled like mildew and turned breath into fog. Hannah Mercer barely slept, but Ethan Blake fared worse. His descent was visible in every shiver, every hollow beneath his eyes, every moment his gaze wandered to spaces where nothing should be. Because for Ethan, the night hag had started to whisper while he was awake. At first he denied it. The weight behind his eyes, the static in his ears, stress, exhaustion, he said. But then he began muttering in his sleep, words not his own. One night Hannah awoke to find Ethan sitting upright in bed, eyes wide, pupils dilated, staring at the far wall. His mouth moved dry and slow. "Let me ride you too." When she shook him, he blinked, unaware of how he got there. That morning, Hannah found bruises around his wrists and ankles, as though hands had held him down. Ethan whispered, "She's trying to wear me." Professor Walter Gray visited again, his face grayer, his movements slower. He examined the house, the walls warping, the air colder even by day. He placed protective runes in each corner, old Norse symbols scrawled in salt and ash. "The house is a vessel now," Gray muttered. "She's no longer visiting, she's settling in." He explained that the only way to sever her hold was through the lucid confrontation. Hannah must face the hag in her domain, knowing it was a dream, armed with the runes, her will, and Gray's guidance from the waking world. But time was thinning. The new moon was just days away. If the hag fully crossed into their reality, she would never leave, not unless the vessel, the house, or the hosts were destroyed. Ethan deteriorated. He walked in his sleep, always toward the attic, always stopped by Hannah or Gray before he reached it. One night, they found him at the foot of the attic ladder, murmuring, "She's waiting in the rafters. She wears the dead." His skin turned grayish, his movements sluggish, as though the hag had threaded herself through his limbs, a puppet mastering its strings. Gray warned Hannah, "If we wait longer, you'll lose him." The house itself seemed to pulse with life, floors damp to the touch, walls trembling subtly. At night, the sound of footsteps was constant, never running, never rushing, just a slow, dragging pace from one room to the next. Hannah began the ritual preparations. Salt circles, runes inked on her palms and forehead, a candle at the bedside, flame blackened at the tip, and a tether, a red thread tied from her wrist to Ethan, anchoring her mind to the waking world. Gray sat vigil beside the bed, muttering incantations, ancient words meant to hold the body safe while the soul wandered. "You must confront her," Gray told her. "Name her, reject her claim, but never ever run in the dream. If you run, she'll chase, and she always catches." Hannah nodded. Fear was a sea inside her, but she let it settle. She had to. As she drifted into sleep under the candlelight, the last thing she heard was Ethan's voice, dry and hollow. "She's coming, Hannah, she's here." Darkness swallowed her, and the house was waiting. It stood in her dream, but it was not the same. The wood was blackened, the walls soft and wet. The air hummed with whispers, thousands of them overlapping. And at the top of the staircase stood the night hag. Her body was longer now, stretched unnaturally, bones pushing against her skin. Her hair hung in slick curtains, her eyes deep pits where light vanished. She spoke without moving her mouth. "Little sleeper, little grief. I've worn so many, but you'll fit best." Hannah stood her ground. She was inside the dream. She had to remember that. "I am not yours," she said, though her voice shook. "You have no dominion here." The hag's head cocked, curious, amused. "You called me with your sorrow, and you'll feed me forever." Behind the hag, shadows moved, figures of past victims, their faces half-formed, their mouths sewn shut, their eyes pleading. And at her feet, Ethan, kneeling vacant-eyed, his head bowed. In the waking world, Gray watched Hannah's body twitch, her breath shallow, her fists clenching. Ethan stirred too, his head lolling, whispering, "She's here, she's here." The house trembled, dust falling from the beams, the boards groaning with a pressure no human feet caused. Gray tightened his grip on the runes. "Come back, girl," he whispered, "or the house takes you both." In the dream, the hag lunged. But Hannah remembered, "Don't run." She stood even as the hag's hands, cold as death, gripped her shoulders. Hannah screamed back, "You wear my grief, but I keep it. You don't ride me." The runes on her palms burned, searing light that forced the hag to recoil, hissing like steam on cold flesh. The house shook, the shadows screamed, and Hannah ran not in fear but toward Ethan, grabbing his hands, shouting, "Wake up, she doesn't own you." In the real world, Ethan gasped, arching his eyes, snapping open. And in that instant, the tether pulled. Hannah awoke, breathless, soaked in sweat. The candle had burned low. Gray smiled weakly. "You're not lost," he whispered. Ethan sat up, dazed, tears streaming down his face. But the house was not silent. The boards still creaked. The air still whispered. Because the hag was not gone. Not yet. The house would not stop moving. By day, its walls groaned softly, as if adjusting bones. By night, the sounds deepened, creaks became footfalls, floorboards bowed under invisible weight, and the whispers swelled into 100 overlapping voices, all speaking words no one living could understand. The night hag was waking completely. Hannah Mercer could feel it in her blood, a constant low vibration beneath her skin, a gnawing ache in her chest. Every blink dragged shadows further into the room. Every reflection twisted slightly, never showing the world quite right. Ethan Blake sat hollow-eyed, still alive, still weak, his mind fragile. Professor Walter Gray grew paler, his hands trembling with age and dread. They knew the truth. The ritual had failed to end her. Hannah had stood her ground, but she hadn't finished it. "She's still waiting," Gray whispered. "She's tethered now halfway here. If we don't send her back before the new moon, she'll stay, and the house will be hers." They prepared for the final ritual, a controlled descent, a lucid dream, deliberate and dangerous. This time, Hannah would enter with knowledge, awake within the dream, conscious of her mind's boundaries. She would confront the hag not as prey, but as a hunter. Gray painted symbols across Hannah's arms and chest, protection runes, wards. Ethan tied a red string from her wrist to his, the old tether between sleeping and waking. Gray's voice was grave. "When you see her, name her, acknowledge what she is, deny her claim." "And if I fail?" Hannah asked. Gray did not answer. The night was starless, the sky a pit of ink. Hannah closed her eyes in the ritual circle, breathing deeply. The house exhaled around her, the air heavy with rot. Sleep came. And when it did, so did the house of dreams. She stood within the same walls, but they were twisted, wood slick and blackened, walls oozing a slow, dark sap. The house breathed visibly, inhaling the air, exhaling moans. At the top of the stairs, she waited. The night hag. Her form was larger, stretched taller than the ceiling, hair long as curtains, tangled and wet. Her eyes remained holes, endless pits, but her mouth had stitched itself into a grin made of bone and wire. She spoke in every voice Hannah had ever known, her mother, her own, Ethan's, strangers long dead. "Little sleeper, welcome home. Lie down, let me ride you to the dark." Hannah's hands burned, the runes glowing faintly, warmth battling cold. "I know what you are," she said. "Your grief, your guilt, your death dressed in my memories." The hag tilted her head, amused. "And still you're here." Hannah stepped forward. The house shuddered with each step, the walls rippling. She raised her hands, palms outward, runes brightening. "You don't wear me. I buried my grief and you can't dig it up." The hag hissed, her hair whipping like vines. But Hannah stood still. "I name you," Hannah whispered. "You are the hag, the shadow and sleep. You have no voice here." "I have yours," the hag growled. She lunged, and Hannah didn't run. She stepped into the hag's grasp, her hands pressing against the cold chest, her will sharp. "You are not my grief, you're just a shadow, and shadows disappear." The runes blazed, searing light against shadow. The hag screamed, her voice fracturing into static and wind. The house shook violently, beams splitting, walls crumbling. The shadows peeled away like burnt paper, her body unraveling into smoke. "You'll dream again," the hag promised, voice fatting. "You'll see me when you're weak." But her form collapsed. And then the house fell silent. Hannah awoke gasping, the candle still burning low. Gray and Ethan hovered nearby. She was alive, awake. "I saw her," Hannah whispered. "I named her, she's gone." Gray nodded, for now. The house was still, no groans, no whispers. But Hannah felt the emptiness, like a hole in her soul, a space left behind by something that once fed there. She knew the truth. The night hag never died, she simply waited. In the corner of the room, shadows clung stubbornly, just a little too dark, just a little too still. And sometimes, when Hannah blinked too slowly, she thought she saw her just for a moment. Watching, waiting. The house grew quiet. No more footsteps in the night. No more voices from the walls. The air inside felt lighter, as though something vast and cold had finally exhaled and receded. But silence in Black Hollow was never safety. It was patience. Hannah Mercer remained in the house, weeks after the ritual. Her body recovered, but the weight of exhaustion never truly left her bones. The bruises faded, but her nights remained shallow, her dreams pale and thin. And sometimes, when the sky was gray and the rooms were too still, she heard the boards creak, just once, just faintly. Just enough to remember. Ethan Blake stayed by her side. He tried to forget, tried to believe they had won, that the night hag had been banished. But sometimes, in the dead quiet between waking and sleep, he swore he felt a weight on his chest, fleeting and cold. He didn't tell Hannah. And Hannah didn't ask. Professor Walter Gray returned to his books, his scrolls, his runes, but his letters to Hannah came fewer and fewer, each written with a heavier hand. In his last letter he wrote, "She is gone, but not gone. That which is named sleeps until we forget its name." Hannah never replied, she already knew. The mirrors in the house remained covered. The attic door stayed shut, nailed tight. But shadows have no need for permission. When Hannah passed the old hallway mirror, still veiled beneath a white cloth, she sometimes saw a ripple, a shift, something moving behind her reflection, as though it lived in the glass now, waiting for a crack to slip through. Then came the new moon. The sky was black, starless, moonless. That night the house breathed again, one long, slow breath, like lungs remembering air. Hannah awoke with a start. She sat up in bed, listening. The air was still. Ethan slept, his breath slow and steady. But then, in the far corner of the room, a shape moved. A figure not tall, not clear. Just the suggestion of a woman, hair long and hanging, standing just beyond the reach of moonlight that wasn't there. Hannah blinked. The shape was gone, but she knew it hadn't left. Outside, the wind stirred the trees, and the house stood quiet. But within the walls, beneath the floorboards, in the spaces between waking and sleep, the shadow remained. Always watching, always waiting, because the night hag never leaves forever. She waits for the next dream deep enough to come home. Story 3. The villa was designed to be admired, not inhabited. It stood on a coastal cliff, its architecture all sharp lines and glass, flaunting its existence to the sea. From afar, it looked like a jewel balanced on the edge of the world. But up close, it was an exhibition, a house built to be watched, recorded, consumed. Inside, the air smelled of citrus-scented cleaner and money. Marble floors gleamed, furniture sat arranged as if awaiting a magazine photo shoot, and every window begged to be a backdrop. Yet beneath the sterile perfection, there was a stillness, as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to disturb it. And then the influencers arrived. 7 of them, perfectly diverse in their brands, but identical in their hunger for eyes on them. Vanessa Stone, the beauty guru with 1 million followers and twice as many curated angles. She moved with the confidence of someone who never saw herself without a filter. Her phone never left her hand. Her gaze flicked constantly between screens and mirrors. Chase Mercer, the fitness icon, whose biceps had their own Instagram account. Every movement calculated, every sweat bead wiped theatrically on camera. Logan Fry, the gaming streamer and tech reviewer, always half hidden behind LED-lit monitors and headsets, voice a constant patter of sarcasm for his live audience. Sophie Bloom, the lifestyle and culinary blogger, more concerned with arranging chia seeds than speaking to anyone. Zane Archer, the travel vlogger, whose drone buzzed overhead like an obedient fly, capturing the villa from above. Haley Cruz, the makeup artist and comedian, quick with a joke, already narrating her impressions of the villa with exaggerated expressions. And then there was Tyler Brooks, not an influencer but their manager, corralling contracts, equipment, and egos, already tired before the trip had begun. The content began immediately. Selfies on the marble staircase, slow-motion videos by the infinity pool, vlogs recorded against the setting sun. They didn't see the news. Outside their curated reality, the world was unraveling. Whispers of a violent outbreak, cities shutting down, hospitals overflowing. But for the villa's guests, notifications not tied to social media algorithms were easily ignored. Until the live streams began to stutter. Comments slowed, view counts dropped, the Wi-Fi signal flickered. And then the messages came. What's happening out there? Are you guys safe? They're eating people. Go inside, don't open the doors. They laughed it off. A prank, a meme, some viral marketing campaign. Then came the first scream. It cut through the villa's manicured air like a crack in glass. A distant, shrill sound echoing from the coastal road below. A sound not meant to be recorded but remembered in nightmares. The drone caught it first. Footage of people running, stumbling, being dragged down by figures whose movements were wrong. Limbs too stiff yet too fast. Blood sprayed across the asphalt, red blooming like flowers in the drone's eye. Zane posted the clip within minutes. It went viral. They didn't call the police, they went live. Vanessa applied makeup as she recounted the events. Hey babes, so like, there's some crazy stuff happening outside, but, stay glam, stay calm. Chase recorded a video titled, 5 Moves to Survive a Zombie Apocalypse, demonstrating squats while screams echoed faintly in the background. Logan continued streaming his game, overlaying the drone footage on screen, pretending it was part of the gameplay. Sophie made cocktails named after blood types. Tyler watched in disbelief, phone in hand, scrolling through updates, eyes widening as the reality refused to buffer. He tried to gather them. We need to lock the doors, we need to get help. But no one listened. There were no likes in panic, no views in hiding. Evening bled into night. The villa lights burned bright, too bright, illuminating them like prey. Outside, the landscape grew quieter, but in that silence was the sound of footsteps. Not hurried, not aimless. Deliberate. Shadows pressed against the glass walls, smudges of red palms, faces pale, eyes dull but wide, their mouths locked in permanent hunger. The influencers didn't notice, not at first. Then the first window cracked. Vanessa screamed not in fear but frustration. My lighting. Chase grabbed a dumbbell. Logan started recording. When the first body pushed through the glass, arms reaching, teeth gnashing, someone, maybe Tyler, finally screamed. They're here. The villa descended into chaos. Tyler shouted for everyone to run, to hide, but half of them were already recording, streaming, posting. The creatures stumbled in, jaws snapping, bodies moving in spasms of predatory instinct. Their eyes did not blink. They did not hesitate. Sophie was the first caught, her arm grabbed as she tried to save her curated tray of hors d'oeuvres. She screamed as her forearm was chewed through, blood spilling across the marble, her phone still recording her face as she shrieked. The live stream captured it all. The likes surged. They fled to the upper floors, Tyler dragging the stunned group into a bedroom, slamming the door shut, jamming furniture against it. The screams from downstairs continued, human, then not. Breathless, bleeding, they sat in silence, the horror settling in. Then Vanessa whispered, almost reverently, "I've never had this many views." They looked at her phone, the numbers ticking upward, the comments flowing. "Is this real? This is amazing. More blood." Logan laughed, a brittle, desperate sound. "We're gonna be famous." Tyler stared at them, realizing. They weren't terrified. They were excited. Because death was trending. And the villa wasn't just their retreat anymore. It was their stage. The morning sun did not bring relief. It rose like a bruise on the horizon, weak and purple, casting pale light across the villa's shattered facade. Blood painted the marble floors, streaked across the windows, dried in handprints where those who broke in had clawed for flesh. The influencers survived the night, but only just. They gathered in the second-floor lounge, exhausted, stained, yet still tethered to their devices. Tyler Brooks paced by the barricaded door. His phone, useless now, blinked. No signal. He stared at the others who sat in the glow of ring lights, still broadcasting. The Wi-Fi was erratic, but the feed still crawled forward. Vanessa Stone dabbed at her bruises with foundation. The screen showed her carefully angled face, flawless in a digital filter. The chat scrolled sluggishly but steadily. "Queen, how are you still alive? Where did you get your highlighter? This is better than Netflix." She smiled, dead eyes behind the shimmer. "Remember to like and subscribe. Death doesn't mean you can't look your best." Logan Fry, laptop perched on his knees, streamed a reaction video to the previous night's attack, editing live footage of zombies devouring assistants, replaying screams with ironic sound effects, slapping memes across blood-slick scenes. "Gotta monetize the apocalypse," he said, grinning. "Content is eternal." Haley Cruz sat nearby, sketching face charts, planning a zombie lookbook, turning the horror into a makeup series. Sophie Bloom was quieter. She stared at her bitten arm, bandaged sloppily, her skin gray at the edges. Still, she filmed herself preparing canned goods into aesthetic meals, captioned, "Apocalypse Brunch. When life gives you carnage, make charcuterie." Zane Archer flew his drone again. The sky was clearer, the roads below littered with abandoned cars and half-eaten bodies. The drone's camera caught figures wandering the streets, the dead still moving, aimless but persistent. Tyler watched them with growing horror. They weren't mourning. They weren't planning escape. They were building content calendars. He snapped, "People are dying. We're trapped in a goddamn tomb and you're worried about hashtags." Logan shrugged. "And what else are we supposed to do? We're already dead if no one's watching." Haley giggled, eyes hollow. "If it didn't get posted, did it even happen?" Vanessa turned to Tyler, her expression serious for the first time. "We have more eyes on us than ever. You want us to waste that?" Tyler stared at them. "You're insane." But insanity wasn't new. It was branded. The day passed with strategy meetings, not for escape, but for collaboration content. Black Circle A workout challenge with Chase Mercer, filmed around barricaded doors. Black Circle A makeup tutorial with Haley, using zombie blood as a blush base. Black Circle A survival cooking segment with Sophie, despite her worsening condition. Meanwhile, Vanessa brainstormed. We need a theme, deathcore aesthetic, decay chic, hashtag suggestions. Tyler tried to plan escape, but no one helped. At dusk, the Wi-Fi connection faltered further. Viewers vanished, comments slowed. Then came the notifications. Networks crashing globally. Cities offline. No rescue coming. And a final chilling trend. The followers are dead. For a moment, the villa grew quiet. The influencers stared at their devices, their lifelines flickering. Then Vanessa smiled thinly. All the more reason to keep posting. She opened a window for better lighting. And that's when the zombies returned, drawn to the light, the noise, the scent of warm bodies. A shadow shifted just outside, then a hand, then another. Fingers pressed against glass, tapping, smearing, pushing. Zane's drone caught it all, streaming live, his laughter shaky but persistent. Haley cheered. The audience loves a cliffhanger. Tyler screamed, shoving furniture to the window, but it was too late. The glass cracked. One tap, two taps. Then the window shattered. The dead poured in, flesh gray, teeth bared, eyes blank but unblinking. And the cameras stayed on. Because the apocalypse was just another live stream. And the followers, dead or alive, still watched. The villa was no longer a retreat. It was a stage, bloodstained and broken, but still performing. The night had taken more of them. The barricades splintered. Windows, once wide and boastful, shattered, allowing the dead to reach inside, hands searching, mouths gnashing. Yet the cameras remained steady. Somewhere between the attacks, the screams, and the blood, the influencers decided. If the world was watching them die, they might as well go viral. Zane Archer was the first to declare it. His drone had captured grisly footage. A slow, drifting shot of bodies being torn apart in the garden, framed with cinematic precision. He edited the video between attacks, adding ambient music, slow motion effects, text overlays. Aesthetic carnage, death but make it art. It reached 3 million views before the connection staggered. Vanessa Stone filmed herself applying lip gloss in front of a boarded window, blood drying behind her. "Hey ye my angels," she whispered, her voice honeyed despite the shudder in her breath. "Day 3 of the apocalypse and still flawless. Don't forget, even in death, be your best self." Her stream was a glitching nightmare, half her face, then static, then screams echoing from elsewhere in the villa. But the likes climbed. Logan Fry dug deeper into his gaming audience. He streamed a zombie survival guide, IRL edition, narrating each moment like a let's play. And here we have the slow ones. Always go for the knees, folks. Less chance they'll catch you when you sprint. Not that I've sprinted in months. He laughed, though his eyes were red, his hands trembling. Comments flooded in, though fewer by the hour. "Bro, this is so meta. Fake as hell long. When's the merch dropping?" Logan smiled bitterly. There would be no merch, no drop, only a descent. Sophie Bloom worsened. The bite on her arm turned black around the edges, veins darkening beneath her skin like ink spills. But she still filmed. She called it Decomposition Diaries, showing her audience the transformation of her body with culinary flair. "Today's decay comes with a side of regret and rosemary," she joked, laughing weakly, her teeth beginning to yellow. Her followers watched her rot in real time. Tyler Brooks watched all of this from the corner of the lounge, horrified. He pleaded, shouted, begged them to help fortify the villa to escape, but they waved him off. "We're building our legacy," Vanessa said, voice flat. "What legacy?" Tyler spat. "We'll be dead." She looked at him with pity, dead but famous. Haley Cruz filmed a zombie transformation makeup tutorial using actual gore. She smeared blood beneath her eyes, used intestines as grotesque accessories. Her audience adored it. Until mid-filming, a shadow moved behind her. She didn't flinch, she knew it was coming. When the zombie lunged, the camera caught everything: her laughter, the bite, her screams, the gurgle as her throat was torn. The livestream cut to black, but the comments kept coming. Legend. She really committed. 10/10 content. By dusk, the villa was a tomb, the air rank with death and desperation. Tyler tried to leave. Zane filmed him sneaking down the hall, whispering, "Look at our little hero, folks." Tyler shoved him aside, fury blazing. "Film this," he hissed, "when you're next." Zane posted it anyway, titling it, "Manager Goes Rogue, Apocalypse Drama." That night, the connection died completely. No more comments, no more likes. Only silence. But they kept filming, because the cameras didn't care if anyone watched. The horror was content, and content was forever. The villa became a mausoleum of vanity. Days passed, or maybe hours, time blurred when the sun refused to shine through the stained, blood-slicked windows. The dead prowled just beyond the broken glass, their shuffling footsteps a constant background hum. And inside, the survivors, if they could still be called that, devised their greatest project yet. If the world was ending, they would name it, hashtag it. Zane Archer coined it first. He stood before a shattered window, phone in hand, live signal dead but recording regardless. His eyes hollow, his grin too wide. Welcome to the hashtag apocalypse, folks. Tag it, share it if you're still breathing. Zomcom #survival chic, we're making extinction fashionable. Vanessa latched onto the idea instantly. She tore sheets into sashes, tying them around her waist like a post-apocalyptic couture line. Blood smeared her cheeks as contour. She posed amid the wreckage, instructing Tyler to take candids. Tyler refused, but Logan did not. His camera rolled, his commentary steady even as his voice cracked. Day whatever of the world's end, and here we see the queen of carnage herself, Vanessa Stone, redefining end-of-the-world glam. Vanessa smiled, teeth red with wine and something darker. Sophie Bloom, too weak to stand now, propped herself against the kitchen island. Her infection advanced, her skin blotched, her breath raspy, yet her eyes burned with purpose. She filmed one last cooking segment. Welcome to Apocalypse Eats, where the garnish is despair. She arranged canned beans, stale crackers, and a severed finger, hers, all plated neatly. Her voice shook. Always plate with purpose. Even the end deserves presentation. She collapsed shortly after, camera still filming her slow, shuddering breaths. In the villa's ruined lounge, Logan set up a mock livestream set, despite no connection. He spoke to empty screens, fielding imaginary comments, answering ghosts. You're asking, Logan, how do you survive when the dead surround you? Easy, you keep the content alive. Or undead, whatever. Zane, meanwhile, wandered the halls, tagging walls with red spray paint. Hashtags, slogans, graffiti for an audience that would never see. Dead but trending. Apocalypse score. Influence or infect. Tyler watched them descend into madness. He tried again to rally them. We can escape. There's a service tunnel. We can make it if we move now. But they shook their heads. We're not escaping, Vanessa whispered. We're curating. Tyler snapped. You're curating your graves. Vanessa only smiled. Better to die trending. That night, the dead breached the barricades. The groans were louder, the footsteps heavier. Something in the air had shifted. The dead no longer wandered aimlessly. They moved with purpose. Toward sound, toward light, toward the influencers still performing. They came through the main hall first, dozens of them, faces slack, eyes unblinking, mouths gaping. Logan kept filming. Vanessa posed. Zane tried to climb higher for a drone shot. And Sophie was already gone, her body cold, her eyes still open, recording nothing. Tyler fled. He grabbed supplies, smashed through the servants' passage, and disappeared into the night, the screams of the villa chasing him like echoes. Behind him, the villa collapsed not in stone, but in purpose. Cameras fell, batteries died. But somewhere, footage survived. Phones still recording until the very last moment, lights blinking red even as blood painted the floors. The hashtags faded with them. But the apocalypse, it never needed an audience. The villa was hollow now, its walls smeared with the final handprints of those who once sought followers over survival. The dead owned the halls, but in the cold, damp wine cellar beneath the wreckage, a flickering light still burned. Tyler Brooks, Sophie Bloom barely breathing, and Zane Archer huddled together in the dark. The air reeked of mildew, stale wine, and rot seeping from upstairs. They had escaped the initial breach, but there was no plan beyond hiding. Then Zane spotted it, a box, untouched in the corner, marked with the logo of a popular survival brand. A delivery, some misguided automated sponsorship, shipped before the world collapsed. They dragged it to the center of the room. Dust coated its edges, but the tape remained firm. On top, a note. For our partners in the creator's retreat, stay ready survival kit. Tyler wanted to open it quickly, desperately, but Zane stopped him. We're filming this. Tyler stared. Are you serious? Zane's eyes were wild. It's an unboxing. We're influencers. It's what we do. And so they did. Zane set up his phone, its battery barely clinging to life. He angled it toward them, switched on the flashlight. They sat before the box, dead-eyed and exhausted, but with the pretense of enthusiasm. Zane cleared his throat, his voice hollow. Hey survivors, today we're unboxing the end of the world kit, brought to you by the apocalypse. He ripped the tape open. Inside, canned food, a small hatchet, a flare gun, medical supplies, and water purification tablets. For a brief shining moment, hope. They passed items between them, narrating with trembling voices. Tyler pocketed the hatchet. Sophie weakly smiled, holding up a water purifier as if presenting a trophy. But then the light caught something else. At the bottom of the box, a phone, preloaded with a live stream app, branded with the survival company's logo. A handwritten tag. For exclusive content, keep your followers updated. Zane laughed, a broken sound. We'll die streaming. Tyler grabbed the flare gun. We'll die escaping. They prepared to flee. They ate what little they could, wrapped themselves in thin blankets. Tyler led the way, hatchet gripped tight, flare gun loaded. But as they reached the stairs, the air changed. The dead waited, silent still. Not mindless anymore. They watched, heads tilted, eyes hollow but aware, as if recognizing the performers returning to the stage. Zane couldn't help himself. He raised his phone, whispered to his non-existent audience. Final vlog, guys, let's make it viral. The dead moved. They surged down the steps, limbs stiff but driven, their groans low, anticipatory. Tyler fired the flare, the light burst in blinding red, searing a few in its path. The smell of burnt flesh filled the cellar. Sophie screamed, her voice faint, her body too weak to run. Zane tried to pull her, still filming, but a hand caught him, teeth sank into his shoulder. He didn't drop the phone. Even as they dragged him down, he screamed at the camera. Like, subscribe, remember me. Then silence. Only the recording remained, a live feed of the floor, red with blood, muffled screams, and the dead feasting. Tyler ran. He clawed his way to the surface, through halls of death, over the bodies of former friends. Outside, the world was gray. Smoke choked the sky. The ocean, distant and black, roiled under storm clouds. He didn't stop running until the villa was a shadow behind him. Inside, the dead wandered, occasionally tripping over phones still recording. One zombie, bloated, its face half-eaten, stared into a camera's lens. It tilted its head as though remembering. Then, in a voice dry and broken, it whispered, "Subscribe." The villa rotted. Wind howled through its broken glass and crumbling wood, carrying the stench of blood, mildew, and death. Where laughter once echoed, staged and manic, now there was only the wet shuffle of feet, the occasional snap of bone, the low groan of something that should not speak. But in one corner, a light still blinked. A phone, its screen cracked but alive, continued to stream nothing but the vacant, blood-smeared floor. The battery should have died. The connection should have broken. But still it broadcasted to no one, to nowhere. Or so it seemed. Far from the villa, miles inland, Tyler Brooks survived. He lived in the ruins of a gas station, barricaded by overturned shelves and broken refrigerators. He had no phones, no signal, only memories. Nights were the worst. The sky was permanently gray, like the sun had died with the rest of them. The nights carried sounds, not just the groans of the dead, but voices. Sometimes he heard them clearly, faint and warbling, like sound traveling through bad reception. Like, share, subscribe. He told himself it was the wind, but he knew better. He had seen Zane die, clutching his phone. He had heard Vanessa's last post, that thin, smiling voice even as teeth tore through her cheek. The dead didn't just kill, they watched. They learned. One night the storm broke. Rain lashed the station. Thunder groaned. Tyler lit a makeshift torch and tried to sleep. But the light flickered, and then he saw it. A shadow at the window, a face, blank, wet with rain, skin peeling. A zombie, but not moving to attack. Instead, it held something. A phone. It pressed the device to the glass, its lifeless eyes locked on Tyler. The screen glowed, the camera faced him. And then a voice, broken but deliberate. "Smile." Tyler froze. The thing didn't move further. It stood, recording as if expecting performance. More shadows gathered behind it. Shapes stumbling, dragging, but each clutching a device, phones, cameras, anything that blinked. They recorded him, streaming his fear. Elsewhere, across what was left of cities, the same happened. The dead held screens. Some mounted them on their chests. Others held tripods with broken fingers. They didn't just hunger, they broadcasted. Wanderers, human survivors, whispered stories of the last streamers. That the dead now carried memory not just in their bodies, but in the technology they clutched. If you screamed, if you ran, they followed. If you posed, smiled, performed, they stopped recording. And once they recorded you, the story said, you would join them. Not as yourself, but as a rerun. A recording stuck on repeat, played forever in the dying airwaves of the world. Tyler tried to escape the station. But the dead were waiting. Dozens of them in the mist, holding phones with cracked screens still blinking red. They didn't attack. They watched. Waiting. He broke, he screamed, he ran. And the dead followed, phones raised, lenses fixed. And the last thing Tyler heard before they dragged him down was the faint, distorted sound of a voice. "Thank you for watching." In the villa, the old stream still played, looping, endless, the light of 1,000 dying batteries flickering like candles for the dead. Somewhere in the static of old networks, the signal carried. To no one, or to something else still watching. Because the world didn't end in silence. It ended on a live stream. Story 4. The road to Black Hollow wound like a vein through a corpse. Narrow, cracked, and swallowed by ancient trees, it seemed forgotten by the world, and that was no accident. Some places go quiet because the world moves on. Others go quiet because something in them demands silence. Black Hollow was the second kind. The village had not seen new life in years, not since the last light of hope flickered out with the dying breath of its elder priest, not since the woods grew thick and close, suffocating what little air remained. And now, in the dead heart of October, the air itself tasted like rot. The car's tires crunched over gravel as it pulled into the central square, though square was generous. A cracked stone well stood in the center, half swallowed by moss. The surrounding cottages sagged with age, their roofs shingled with mold, their windows blind with dust. And into this place came Claire Whitmore, the daughter of a woman long thought mad, long rumored dead, now confirmed so. They said Eleanor Whitmore had gone peacefully, that she had died in her sleep, eyes closed, body untouched. But no one could explain the strange symbols scrawled around her bed, nor the salt circles on the floor. No one could explain the mirror shattered inward, as if something had crawled out of it. They simply buried her, and they called Claire, the daughter who'd escaped years before, to collect what was left. But Claire had not returned for her mother. She had returned because something inside her refused to stay silent any longer. The house stood on the outskirts, past the creek that never dried, past the dead birch trees that never bent in the wind. The Whitmore house had once been proud 2 stories, whitewashed, its windows tall and welcoming. Now it stood like a mouth about to scream. Shutters hung askew. Ivy strangled its walls. The front door groaned when it opened, and the air inside was wet, not damp, but wet, like breath against the nape of the neck. The house had not been touched. No relatives had come. No neighbors had cleaned. Everything inside remained where it had fallen, dust-coated plates on the table, a glass of milk turned to paste, a record player whose needle still rested on a long-finished album. In the corner of the living room, a bundle of dried rosemary hung upside down, tied with red string. And upstairs, in her mother's bedroom, Claire found the remnants of a ritual. The walls were painted with charcoal symbols, ones that spun in spirals and teeth, not language but feeling, something older than writing, something learned in silence. The bed itself was pristine, the sheets white, the pillow still indented where a head had rested. But the mirror, the tall standing mirror, was shattered from the inside. Its edges curved outward, glass scattered like icy petals, and in the broken shards no reflection showed at all. Just darkness. Claire stayed, because the will said she had to, because the house now belonged to her, because she could not admit aloud that she felt something waiting for her here. In the village, the people noticed her return, not with welcome, with fear. They peered from behind curtains. They whispered in alleys. They lit lanterns at night and hung charms on their doors, rabbit bones, dried lavender, circles of iron wire. Only one person approached her directly. Daniel Hale. He stood outside the general store, older now, gaunt, his eyes deep-set and sleepless. He had been Claire's friend once. They had run through the woods as children, told ghost stories, dared each other to touch the old standing stones. But now he looked like a man who'd seen something crawl through his dreams and never leave. "Why did you come back?" he asked, no warmth in his voice. "My mother died," Claire said. Daniel stared. "Your mother didn't die, she was taken." Claire tried to laugh it off, but Daniel didn't smile. "You need to leave," he said, "before the moon dies." Claire frowned. "What?" But Daniel only muttered, "She knew the rituals. She kept it buried, but now she's gone and it's waking again." He left her there under the gray sky, as crows circled the trees like carrion smoke. That night the wind refused to blow, but the windows breathed. Claire lay in her childhood bedroom, now stripped of joy, the wallpaper peeling like old skin, the corners heavy with cobwebs. At 2:13 a.m. she awoke. Not from a dream, from a sound. Footsteps on the second floor, slow, deliberate. But she was alone. She crept to the hallway, each board groaning under her weight. The air smelled of wet soil. The footsteps had stopped. She reached the door to her mother's room. It was ajar. Inside, nothing. Until the mirror blinked. One shard near the floor caught the hallway behind her, and for one heartbeat, she saw a figure standing in the hallway, just behind her shoulder. She spun around. No one. When she looked back, the mirror reflected nothing at all. Not even her. The next day, she went to the village church, hoping for some sense of peace. She found none. The priest was dead. The doors were locked. The cemetery behind it had stones with no names, just marks like slashes in stone. And all along the fence, wooden stakes had been hammered with animal skulls on top: foxes, raccoons, deer, even wolves, their mouths sewn shut with red thread. Claire returned home, shaken, only to find the front door open, though she had locked it. On the table, a bowl of water filled to the brim. Floating inside, a single lock of hair. Her own. And beneath the bowl, a torn scrap of Eleanor's journal. 4 words. The moon is fatting. The villagers began to vanish. First, an old woman found drowned in the well, no signs of struggle, no water in her lungs, just mud packed in her throat. Then a boy no older than 10, seen walking into the woods under a blank, moonless sky, never came back. The few who remained grew quieter, pale, afraid to speak. They hung mirrors faced them. They refused to look at the night sky. Claire walked into the woods, retracing old steps. The trees whispered, not in words, but in the sound of breath drawn and never exhaled. At the edge of a dry creek bed, she found a small shrine. Inside it, bones. Tiny, human. And scratched into the wood above it. The soil remembers. On the 3rd night, Claire stood in the ritual chamber beneath her house, a room she never knew existed until her foot found a soft spot on the floor and the wood collapsed inward. Down there among the bones and candles, the air was different. Still wet, listening. She lit a match. The walls were covered in symbols, not just her mother, but older ones, in red, not ink. Something had been painted here, using blood. In the center, a circle of mirrors, all broken. Claire stepped inside, and the match went out. In the dark, the voice came. Not from her ears, but from beneath her feet. A whisper, low and hollow, like a voice filtered through centuries of soil. I remember you, buried. Claire ran, but the whisper followed. And when she woke the next morning, dirt was beneath her nails. The village of Black Hollow seemed frozen in rot. With each passing day, the sky grew paler, as if the sun itself feared to shine upon the land. The trees along the hills hunched lower, their barren branches clawing at unseen things, and the air grew heavier, a wet, grave-cold heaviness that clung to the skin. Claire Whitmore walked the crumbling paths, her footsteps echoing in the emptiness. The houses that stood hunched and crooked stared back with shuttered windows and doors adorned with strange tokens. Bundles of bones, rusted keys, iron nails wrapped in black thread. Some doorframes bore crude marks scrawled in chalk, symbols she didn't recognize, half circles, slashes, a shape like a split eye. No one greeted her. She caught glimpses of them, faces half hidden behind curtains, eyes following her. Lips moved, but no sound emerged, like the village had forgotten how to speak aloud. Until one voice called to her. You should have stayed gone, girl. It was Graham Bellamy, the village chief, older than she remembered, his skin like parchment pulled over sticks, his voice dry as the dead leaves beneath her feet. He stood outside the old chapel, its doors long sealed with nailed planks. Bellamy's eyes carried the weight of knowing. She remembered him from childhood, a figure of authority but never warmth. Claire approached him. "What's happening here? My mother's gone, the village is. It's dead." Bellamy spat to the dirt. "Your mother was the last thread holding this place together. Now the soil will wake again." "What does that mean?" He looked skyward where the daylight had turned a bruised gray. "When the moon wanes, the ground listens, and when it listens too long, it remembers who fed it." Claire shook her head. "That's nonsense. I want truth, not riddles." Bellamy sneered. "Then ask the witch. She's the only one left who will speak plainly." Claire frowned. "Agatha Crowley." Bellamy nodded grimly. "She lives where the trees don't forget. But be warned, the price of knowing is never cheap." Claire returned to her family house that night, but sleep did not come. At precisely midnight, she awoke to the sound of breathing, not her own, not close, but low and heavy, coming from beneath the floorboards. She sat up, the old wooden floor creaking under her weight. The air smelled like wet earth. Then the sound of scratching, slow, deliberate, as though nails dragged across wood coming from directly under her bed. When she knelt to look, there was nothing, but when she touched the floorboards, they were damp, as though soil pressed just beneath. And then, faintly, the sound of whispering, like a voice buried just under the surface. "Claire, you came home, but you never left." She pulled her hand back, heart hammering. At first light, Claire ventured into the forest beyond the village, searching for Agatha Crowley. The trees grew dense quickly, their branches twisting like arthritic fingers. The air was stagnant, the ground soft in places where it should have been firm. She remembered the stories, that Agatha lived alone, that she spoke to crows, that the dead listened when she whispered. Claire found the shack by following the bones. They hung from trees, small animal skeletons, tied with red string, swaying soundlessly. A perimeter of old mirrors, cracked and blind with age, encircled the clearing. At the center stood a cabin that leaned like it was too tired to stand. Agatha Crowley was waiting on the porch. Her hair, long and white, tangled like webs, her face as wrinkled as crumpled paper, but her eyes were clear and cruel. "You smell like her," Agatha said. "Like who?" Claire asked. "Your mother and the dirt, both." Claire demanded answers, demanded to know why the village rotted, why the earth whispered. Agatha spat on the ground. "Because your family tried to cheat the soil." She beckoned Claire inside. The shack's interior was a shrine of horrors, jars filled with preserved things, feathers, bones, dolls made of sticks and twine. A fireplace burned low, though Claire saw no wood fueling it. Agatha explained. "There is a voice beneath the earth. We called it the Hallowed One. Your mother kept it buried, feeding it rituals and blood, but it remembers you. It marked you when you were just a root in her belly." Claire felt her knees weaken. "What does it want?" Agatha's eyes glittered. "It wants what it always wanted, a body to wear, a throat to speak through, a mouth that never stops screaming beneath the dirt." Claire asked if it could be stopped. Agatha smiled with broken teeth. "Only if you descend, only if you return to where she buried the truth." Claire returned to the village, but it was not the same. Shutters were nailed closed, doors barred. Salt lines dusted the thresholds. The people, pale and thin, watched her not with suspicion but with terror. She found Daniel Hale, bruised, eyes wide, his voice shaking. "They're planning to kill you," he whispered. "They think if they sacrifice you, the soil will stay asleep." Claire's voice cracked. "Do you believe that?" Daniel hesitated too long. I believe the soil remembers." That night the sky turned black, moonless, starless. And the footsteps returned, louder now. not beneath the floorboards, but in the hallway. Claire stood behind her door, breath held, as the floor groaned under invisible weight. Something stopped on the other side. Then a knock. Once, then twice. Then a voice, low and crawling like roots. "Time to come home, little flower." When Claire opened the door, the hall was empty, but muddy footprints led downstairs. She followed them to the cellar. The hidden door to the ritual chamber stood ajar. Inside, the air was rank, the walls damp. In the circle of broken mirrors stood a shape, tall, hunched, its face hidden in shadow. It raised its head slowly. No eyes, no mouth, just a skin of dirt stretched over bones. Yet it smiled, somehow it smiled. "The moon dies soon, Claire, and then you'll remember being buried, and you'll never wake up again." Claire fled, but the house was no longer hers. Something beneath the floorboards laughed softly and waited. Black Hollow slept beneath a blanket of rot, not a sleep of rest, but of something hiding just beneath, breathing with the earth itself. The sky remained moonless, a flat expanse of black silk stretched endlessly. The villagers no longer emerged. Windows glowed faintly with candlelight, but no footsteps crossed the roads. Not even the crows called anymore. Claire Whitmore had stopped sleeping. She knew now that when she slept, she walked. She awoke to muddy footprints in her room, to soil under her fingernails, to bruises on her knees, to splinters in her skin. She was walking in her dreams, but to where? She needed answers, not warnings, and the answers were buried. She returned to Agatha Crowley, who waited on her crooked porch like a gargoyle waiting for the building to collapse. Agatha saw her coming and laughed, dry and cold. "The hollowed one remembers you now. That's why your bones ache at night." Claire demanded to know what her mother had done, what a leaner Whitmore had hidden. Agatha led her inside, past the jars and bones, to a hidden trapdoor beneath a rotten rug. A ladder descended into cold, black nothing. Agatha whispered, "Go down if you want truth, but beware, the soil keeps memory better than the living." Claire climbed down, the wooden ladder creaking with every step. The deeper she went, the colder the air became, until the breath in her lungs felt damp, like breathing through wet cloth. Her boots touched dirt. She stood in a chamber carved from the very earth, walls packed with roots like veins, the air alive with the scent of wet rot. On the walls, bones were pressed into the soil like decorations, skulls with jawbones wired shut, femurs arranged in spirals, names carved into wood, all names of the dead. One plaque read, "Peter Whitmore, her father." Claire staggered back, nausea rising. There at the center of the chamber stood a circle of stones. Within the circle, a hole. Deep black, endless. As Claire stared, a voice seeped up, slick and heavy. "I remember you, tiny bones, little flower, you should have stayed beneath." Claire felt her legs betray her, dragging her closer to the pit. Her mind screamed, but her body obeyed some ancient command. Then something rose. A figure made not of flesh, but of soil and bone. Its face was a mask of roots, its mouth a hollow pit, its body shaped from the bones pressed into the walls, as if the chamber itself had stood up. Claire could not run, she could only watch. The thing spoke without lips, the air vibrating with the sound. "Your mother fed me scraps, but you were promised. You are the last vessel, come home to me." Claire screamed, but not aloud. The scream came from within her mind, echoing back from the walls. She collapsed. And then darkness. She awoke in her bed, though she didn't remember how she returned. But in her room was a gift. A small pile of soil on her nightstand, and buried inside a tooth. Her own. She ran to Daniel Hale's home, pounding on his door until he let her in. He was pale, terrified. "They say you're marked," he said, "that you're the next grave, They think if they burn you, it'll go away. Claire told him of the chamber of the hallowed one, of the pit that spoke. Daniel shivered. Your father went down there, years ago, before he died. I remember your mother made him. He came back wrong. Quiet. He never spoke again. Then one morning he walked into the woods and never came back. Claire's throat tightened. She sent him to the soil. Daniel nodded. She tried to bury it in him. She failed. Claire clenched her fists. Then I'll finish it. Daniel grabbed her wrist. No one comes back from the soil. Claire stared into his eyes. I'm already halfway buried. Might as well see how deep it goes. That night she returned to the hidden chamber beneath her house, the one beneath the floorboards. She lit a candle and stared at the circle of mirrors, broken and rusted. Then she stepped inside. The air changed denser, heavier. Her breath turned to mist. And then the walls of the chamber breathed. The soil moved like lungs under skin. Faces formed in the dirt, her father, her mother, herself as a child, all silent, mouths sewn shut. Claire pressed her hands to the soil and whispered, "Show me." And the soil obliged. She fell through. The ground swallowed her whole, darkness, dampness, pressure on every side. And then she stood in a vision, but it felt real. She was in the forest years ago, a child. Her mother Eleanor stood before her, drawing a circle of salt, her eyes red from crying. You must stay inside the circle, her mother said. If you leave, it will take you. Child Claire nodded. But something in the woods called, a voice sweet and soft. Claire, come dance in the soil. It's soft and warm. The vision snapped. Claire was back in the chamber, gasping. The soil whispered again. You stepped out, little flower. You came to me. And now I remember your bones. Claire collapsed to her knees. The hallowed one had marked her as a child. Her mother had tried to prevent it, but she had left the circle. She had answered the call. And now it wanted her back. She returned to her bed, body shaking, mind fractured. But when she passed a mirror, her reflection did not follow. It remained behind, smiling, its eyes black pits of soil. In Black Hollow, the air soured further. By day, the village was a corpse dressed in fog. By night, it was a mouth yawning wider with each hour, threatening to swallow the last of the living. The moon was gone now, not hidden but absent like an eye plucked from the sky. The nights held no stars, only a ceiling of unbroken black. The wind did not blow. The air was still and wet, like the breath of something vast breathing through the earth. Claire Whitmore's bones ached. She could feel the soil calling, a vibration beneath her feet, beneath her skin. Every mirror she passed showed her shadow moving out of time, lagging behind like something catching up or waiting. She was slipping. The hallowed one whispered in her ears now, not just in the chamber beneath the house, but everywhere. In the drip of water from the tap, in the creak of the walls, in the pulse of her heart. Little flower, soon the soil will remember your weight. She could not resist much longer. But she still had Agatha Crowley, and Agatha knew the old ways. Agatha met Claire outside her shack, under a sky that did not change. The old witch looked thinner, paler, as though the world's decay fed on her as well. You want to bury it, Agatha rasped, but the soil only eats, it does not forget. There must be a way, Claire pleaded. There is, Agatha nodded grimly, but it means you must become the grave yourself. Agatha explained that the ritual of rot was an old rite, forbidden and half-remembered, meant not to kill the hallowed one, but to bind it inside a willing vessel. You'll carry it, suppress it for a time, Agatha whispered, but it will never die, you'll never be free. Claire asked if that's what her mother had tried. Agatha's hollow eyes glinted. Yes, but your mother failed, her love wasn't enough. You must love nothing, not yourself, not anyone. Only then can you hold the rot. Claire didn't hesitate. Tell me what I have to do." That night beneath the house, Claire prepared the chamber for the ritual. The broken mirrors were rearranged in a perfect circle. In the center, she placed bones, some human, some not, and strands of her own hair. Agatha guided her through the steps. Blood, salt, symbols written on flesh, not walls. The soil had to taste her blood, her sorrow. Claire cut her palm and let her blood drip into the soil. It drank greedily. Then she spoke the invocation, the words coarse and dry on her tongue, not a language of the living, but the sound of roots cracking through corpses underground. The air tightened, the walls of the chamber breathed. And then it rose. The hollowed one emerged from the pit, tall, thin, made of soil, bones, and the skins of memories. Faces emerged and dissolved across its surface, whispering, screaming silently. It did not move like a man. It grew, the way mold does slowly, inevitably. Its head bent low to Claire, and in a voice that sounded like her father, her mother, and herself. "You offer yourself, the little flower that left the circle, but soil keeps no promises." Claire stood her ground, though her legs shook. "I offer myself, bind to me, but leave the village." The hollowed one tilted its head, curious. "You'll carry me, but I'll feed on you first." Claire nodded, "Then eat." It lunged, not physically, but with its voice, its presence, its rot. Claire felt herself breaking, bones softening, skin bruising from the inside, her mind fracturing into echoes. She saw visions. Black Circle, her mother weeping, cutting salt circles with trembling hands. Black Circle, her father walking into the woods, hollow-eyed, rope in hand, never returning. Black Circle herself as a child, stepping beyond the salt, touching the soil, and the soil grasping back. She screamed, but inside. The hollowed one pressed deeper, whispering, "You belong to me, soil, bone, marrow, dirt." But through the collapse, Claire found something still, defiance. She bit her own tongue, tasted her own blood, forced herself to remember. Her mother's embrace, the smell of autumn leaves, the light of the moon before it vanished. "I am not your soil," she whispered. She stabbed the ritual dagger into the dirt between them, the final act of the rite. The chamber shook. The hollowed one howled, not in pain but in rage. Its form shuddered, limbs retracting, roots pulling inward, faces melting into its surface. It collapsed into the pit, screaming in every voice it had stolen. The air snapped cold, the walls stopped breathing. And then silence. Claire collapsed. The ritual was done. But she knew what Agatha had said was true. It was not dead. It was inside her now, folded deep in marrow and memory, sleeping. For now, when she emerged from the chamber, her hair had grayed, her eyes darker. Her bones ached with the weight of the dead. But she still stood. She returned to Agatha, who smiled faintly. "You did it, but the soil is patient." "What now?" Claire asked. Agatha's voice was soft, almost kind. "Now you wait, and when the moon wanes again, you either hold it tighter or you feed it." But the village did not know. The villagers stayed hidden, the sky still black. The curse was not gone, merely bound. And inside Claire, in her dreams, the hollowed one whispered still, "Little flower, soil remembers, and so do I." The moonless nights dragged on, each darker than the last, as if the sky had forgotten how to dawn. In Black Hollow, the villagers grew restless, afraid of their own homes, their own reflections. The streets were empty, save for the windless cold, and yet doors slammed in the night, and unseen feet left muddy prints on clean floors. The soil was waking. Claire Whitmore carried it inside her, the hollowed one, like a second soul stitched into her bones. Every night she felt it press against her thoughts, clawing for space, whispering, "Little flower, I am still hungry." Her dreams bled into waking. She tasted earth in her mouth. Her joints ached as though filled with soil, her veins burning with something older than blood. And now the villagers knew. They watched her from behind locked shutters, through cracks in wood and warped glass. They saw the gray in her hair, the blackness in her gaze when the light caught her wrong. And they whispered among themselves, Claire Whitmore was cursed, she was the rot. On the final moonless night, the village changed. A scream echoed through the empty streets, sharp, human, then cut short. Doors bolted tighter, windows nailed shut. Claire emerged from her house to find the air thicker, the ground soft underfoot. The dirt was moving. She felt it under her soles, pulsing, alive. Then she saw them. Villagers wandering, aimless, some barefoot, others weeping, their eyes black as mud, their mouths full of soil. They stumbled through the village as though guided by roots under their feet. One old man stood in the center of the square, muttering to himself before collapsing, dead, his mouth opening not with breath, but a soft pour of worms and dirt. Claire knew the hollowed one was trying to break free through them, through the earth, through her. She clutched her sides as pain bloomed in her ribs. She felt something growing inside, like vines twisting in her lungs. She staggered toward the old chapel, now half collapsed, seeking sanctuary or a place to die. There she found Daniel Hale. He was bloodied, barely standing, eyes wide with terror. "They've lost their minds," he gasped. "The soil in them, it's crawling up their spines." He clutched her arm. "You did this, you're its mouth now." Claire shook her head, fighting the voice inside her. "I tried to stop it." Daniel's voice cracked. "Then stop it again, or we'll all be soil." But the villagers had gathered. Graham Bellamy led them, his face twisted in grim determination. "We burn her," he declared. "We burn her body, her bones. We salt the soil she stood on. It's the only way." They carried torches, ropes, iron rods black with rust. Their eyes were hollow, their minds fraying, driven not by reason but fear. Daniel stood between them and Claire, but he was only one man. Bellamy pointed, "Give her to the soil, or the soil will take us all." The villagers surged forward. Claire ran, Daniel beside her, both stumbling over roots now bursting through the earth like fingers clawing upward. The village itself was alive, houses groaning, streets cracking, trees bending unnaturally. They fled to Claire's house, to the ritual chamber beneath the floor, the last place where the hollowed one was bound. There in the dark, Claire fell to her knees, coughing earth, her vision blurring. Inside her, the hollowed one laughed. "The soil remembers, little flower, and so do they." She felt it pushing, trying to take her voice, her limbs, her mouth. The villagers battered at the house above, doors splintering, torches crackling. Daniel shook her. "Fight it, don't let it out." Claire screamed, not aloud, but inside, clawing at her own mind, focusing on her memories, her mother's rituals, the circle of salt, the first time she left it as a child. And then she remembered the heart of the soil, the relic Agatha had mentioned, a seed-like stone buried deep, capable of sealing the hollowed one inside a vessel. If she could find it, she could trap it fully. But it meant descending, all the way down. Claire stood, weak, trembling. She faced the pit. Daniel grabbed her hand. "You'll die down there." "I'm already dead if I stay," she whispered. And she leapt. She fell through darkness, her body weightless, the air thick and cold, until she landed hard on damp soil. It was another world beneath, a labyrinth of roots, bones, and pulsing walls. The hollowed one towered there, no longer restrained, a colossal figure of decay, its voice filling the tunnels like wind in a grave. "Welcome home, little flower. Lie down and forget." Claire staggered forward, deeper into the tunnels, guided by memory and instinct. She found it a stone, shaped like a heart, glowing faintly red, pulsing like it lived. She grabbed it and the hollowed one screamed. The tunnels shook, soil collapsing, bones rattling. Claire pressed the stone to her chest, willing it to seal the hollowed one inside her. The pain was blinding, her ribs cracked, her heart slowed. "You'll carry me forever," the voice whispered. "You'll never be alone again." And then silence. When Claire awoke, she was still in the ritual chamber, Daniel pulling her from the pit. Above, the villagers were gone, their bodies lifeless, their minds burned out by the soil. The sky was clearing. A sliver of the new moon returned. Claire stood, her body broken, her soul heavier. But she was still herself. For now, the hollowed one slept within her, but she could feel its dreams. Soil in her veins, voices beneath her skin. Black Hollow was quiet once more, not saved, just waiting. And as the new moon hung weak in the sky, Claire heard it whisper one last time. "Next time you'll stay buried." Black Hollow was a grave now. After that final moonless night, the village did not awaken. The houses stood hollow, doors ajar, windows broken. The fields grew wild and wrong, grass too tall, twisted like green bone. No voices rose in the streets, no children played, no fires warmed hearths. The soil had eaten well. Claire Whitmore was the only one left. She lived in the crumbling Whitmore house, its wood soft with damp, its walls heavy with mildew. The ritual chamber below remained sealed, though the earth still pressed under her feet, a quiet thrum, like a heartbeat beneath the floorboards. She rarely left the house. Her reflection had stopped appearing in mirrors. The gray in her hair spread like mold, her eyes shadowed, her skin pale as candle wax. But her heart still beat. The hollowed one was asleep inside her, but its dreams bled into hers. She dreamed of roots growing through her ribs, of her mouth packed with dirt, of waking to find herself standing in the woods, unable to recall how she'd arrived. Each new moon, she locked herself in the ritual chamber, surrounded by salt, iron, and mirrors facing inward. She waited for the soil to call her back. It always did. "Little flower, little grave," the voice cooed inside her mind. Daniel Hale had left. Wounded but alive, he fled the village with nothing but his memories and scars. He told no one of what happened in Black Hollow. Who would believe him? Who would care? He tried to forget. But some nights when the moon thinned, he woke to the taste of soil in his mouth, to the sound of footsteps outside his door, footsteps that left no prints. He dreamed of Claire's face, pale and still, her eyes dark and endless, and he wondered if she was still alive or if she had become part of the earth. Years passed. Black Hollow faded from maps, forgotten by the world. The forest swallowed its roads. The trees closed in, roots splitting stone and brick, reclaiming what the living abandoned. Only the Whitmore house remained visible, a crooked silhouette on the hill, its windows like blind eyes. And some nights, when the air was still and the sky empty, a faint sound echoed from beneath the house. Not a voice, not fully, but singing. Soft, muffled, as though someone buried deep was humming to themselves, waiting for someone to listen. Waiting to be remembered. Long after a stranger, a hiker, lost and curious, found Black Hollow by accident. They stood before the house, the air too still, the soil too soft. They approached, called out, but no answer came. Yet from inside the house they heard movement, a slow, heavy shuffle across rotted floors. Then a whisper behind their ear. "The soil remembers." They ran, but behind them the earth stirred. And the house stood waiting. In Black Hollow, nothing stays buried. Not forever, because the soil remembers. And soon it will be hungry again.